let me take just a minute and pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time together and this day. God, I thank you for Lauren and for the work of his organization. I thank you for the way that you are using Kutsko Consulting in the Valley here and beyond. And God, I just pray that as Lauren speaks and shares with us today, that that God, we would hear your voice, that we would hear what you have specifically for us, right where we are as leaders and as organizations, all at different mile markers. And so we just commit this time to you and pray that you would bless it and make it special. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Lauren, take it away.
Amen. Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it. So just a quick business item. Right now, I can see some of you guys, and then can you only see my screen, or do you also see you guys? Anybody see themselves in my screen?
Yeah, I've got my view set, so I've got everybody up here.
Okay, cool. Well, I am glad that you guys are all here today. I love this topic. So I'll just kind of dive right in. But my name's Lauren Kutsko. My company is called Kutsko Consulting. That's because I'm not a branding company. We don't do branding consulting, because when we need to brand things, we just pick our last name to brand them. But we basically do team development. So we help leaders. We walk with leaders who are leading teams and want those teams to be transformed and aligned. And one of the ways that we often do that is through talking about emotional intelligence, which we'll go through today. We've done this conversation before with Venture 19, and this time we wanted to kind of come back and focus a little bit more heavily on how the gospel influences that, or the intersection of the gospel and emotional intelligence. So that's what we'll be doing. I do really want this to be interactive. So if you were kind of hoping that you could, just sort of listen to me talk for an hour, I'm hoping that won't happen. I think it'll be more of a blessing to you guys if you have a space to discuss how this works in your current work and on your current team. So I'll be pausing and asking some questions and just trying to get some interaction. So basically the things we're going to talk about. So I'm going to go over what is emotional intelligence. That's probably going to be review for some people, but I want to just get everybody on the same page about that. Then what is the gospel, which again, I think with this group, that'll be review. Talk about the relationship between those two things, talk about the relationship between those two things and our leadership, and then go through some ways to better understand ourselves and our teams as we wrap up. So a little bit about my story and kind of why this became a topic that has some interest to me. I live in Phoenix, so we're out here in Arizona with Jonathan. My wife and I had been married for about a year when we moved out here from Indiana. So we met each other at Indiana University. We were invited to move out to Arizona to be on the launch team of a church plant. And I tried desperately for months to find a job in Arizona before we moved out, but wasn't able to figure it out. So we moved out without work. She got a job at Starbucks. I did a couple part-time odds and ends things for a few months. And then finally was hired full-time and started a job on the IT support team of a company out here. And I had this interaction early on. So, you guys have probably all gotten new jobs before. You go through the orientation process. You pick up your paperwork, you're kind of filling things out. And I remember one of the last things that I did as I was going through that orientation phase was my new boss. And I'm 23 years old. I'm excited to have a new job, a new boss. I'm excited about, being in a new place and, looking forward to who's my new leader that I get to learn from and look up to and support in this new work. And this awkward interaction that we had very early on, he hands me a key and he says, "This is a key to the office. This is going to get you in here on the weekends and you're going to need that." And I just remember feeling deflated in some ways, family was important to me. I wanted to spend, the weekends working on the church plant, being with my family. I didn't want to work on the weekends, but in some ways I was more deflated by the fact that there was just obviously this disconnect so early that my new boss, didn't appear to be that excited to have me on the team. Other than the fact that I was sort of the low man on the totem pole, who, these sort of different tasks could be delegated to. And that's fine. Of course, coming in on the weekend is the job that needs to be done. But it was the attitude, it was the tone that did not really resonate with me. And I think that was one of these key moments, and that's almost 20 years ago now, but these key moments where I really wanted to help. I really wanted to learn how to lead myself more effectively than that. I really wanted, when I eventually learned what emotional intelligence was, I wanted that to be part of my leadership. And now wanting to helping our clients do that. So curious to get to know you all just a little bit. We've got a good sized group here to kind of have some discussion. So I'd love to know who's here. I saw your names a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind just telling us your name, something about the team that you're currently on, and what was it that got you interested when you saw this topic come through Jonathan's invitation? Who's willing to go first?
I'll go first. My name is Eloise Nathaniel. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I am with Choices Pregnancy Center, Greater Phoenix. My role there is Community Relations Manager. And I'm here today because every time, I don't care what course he has, every time I learn something. Sometimes I don't even look at the title. But this one is more for me to understand how the gospel and the emotional intelligence interact. So that kind of motivated me to be here to learn. And I'm always learning, always. I'm an open book for learning. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Eloise.
Mm-hmm.
Who else?
My name is Steve Campbell. I am the founder and director of an organization called Center. Right now, I am the team, and I'm intrigued by this because I have done a bunch of study on emotional intelligence, and I just am always intrigued about how others think about it, how they process it, how they use it, and so it's just intriguing to me, and so I wanted to be here.
Awesome. Glad you're here, Steven.
John Taylor here in Phoenix, and I'm with Coaching Mission International. We provide leadership and life coaching and coach training to missionaries around the world. We are a small staff, virtual staff. I've always been scattered around the country, and 4 full-time, 3 part-time. And as has already been said by Eloise first, I think that this is always a great thing to learn on and to sharpen skills on. So that's why I'm here today.
Good to see you, John.
And I am Bridget with Hope Kids North Texas. And so I knew Jonathan back when I lived in Arizona and was with Hope Kids Arizona. And so when all of these virtual workshops came about, I was super excited. And like Eloise, I just love to learn. And so that's why I signed up. And I lead a team. We're a small team of 3 here in North Texas, 3 of us.
Awesome. Good to meet you, Bridget.
And Heather Hicks. I work with Reconciled World internationally, working with churches in rural poor communities, doing holistic discipleship. And when I saw this topic, I very much interested in it, but then it really sealed the deal when I saw who was teaching it, because Lauren's one of my favorite people. So I'm excited to hear what you have gained and how you share it with other people.
And I am Liz Beck. I am with Hope for Addiction. And we have a staff of 4 full-time staff members. We have also a home for single moms with kids. So we are busy. And I was interested in the topic. Jonathan has just been producing so many great trainings for us as leaders. And so I am always interested in improving my leadership. And so I'm interested to hear what you have to say to teach us today.
Good to meet you, Liz. I think you might be last, Paul. You're on mute at the moment.
My name is Paul Cox, and I'm the Director of Advancement for Teen Challenge Arizona. Been around it for about 35 years as a volunteer before I got drafted. And, I'm always interested in intellectual property because I want to absolutely discern it and see how that relates to the Word of God. So I'm here because I trust Jonathan. He's bailed me out in so many ways in so many areas of my life, including a 53-day induced coma that he was a vessel for prayer and a lot of other people. So if anybody's on here for that, thank you. I still get to be part of the kingdom here on this earth. So anything that you're going to say, I'm going to try to soak up like a sponge.
Awesome. Well, yeah, really glad that we've got a diverse group. Sounds like we've got California, Arizona, Texas. Is that right? Anybody further away than that? It's good stuff. Great to see Jonathan, the Venture 19 audience growing outside of Arizona too. That's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed meeting Jonathan and just seeing the stuff that's put out by this group. I'm excited about the future. So what is emotional intelligence? I'm going to just kind of define it, and then again, want to just have a little bit of conversation around it. So emotional intelligence is a set of 5 skills. And I really like to emphasize that it is skills because our work at Kutsko Consulting, we do a lot of work with different kinds of assessments. So one of the ways that we help our leaders, our clients, understand the people that they lead is that we give them access to tools so that they can understand how their people behave, what their core competencies are, what drives them, all in an effort to help those leaders really serve each person on the team uniquely. And there's been a lot of different assessments out there, right? There's a lot of different personality theories. So, we've all seen Enneagram be really popular recently. I know there was recently a Venture 19 talk on that. DISC assessments and Myers-Briggs assessments and all these different things. And one of a lot of them that are based on temperament and typing people, they are about learning about what's going on the inside of yourself and who you are or how you behave externally. They're not about changing those things. They're about understanding, and in this crowd, understanding what God has put in you, how you've been created, who you are. And that's good self-learning. It's good for learning about other people. Emotional intelligence, which we measure in EQ, emotional quotient, is different. It's a set of 5 skills, and we want those skills to grow. So if I take a Myers-Briggs and I find out that I'm an INFP, or I take an Enneagram and I find out that I'm a 6, or a DISC and I'm a low D, the goal is not to change that. So we measure DISC on a 0 to 100. If I find out that I'm a 17D, which would put me low, I don't want to try to be a 95D or a 73D. I want to own and be fully that D, that INFP, that 6 on the Enneagram, and understand the dynamics of that. With emotional intelligence, we also use a scale of 0 to 100 to measure these 5 skills, and we want everybody to be a 100. We want everybody to be as skilled as possible at these things. So that was the first thing I want you guys to take away with emotional intelligence. It's not a typing methodology. It's a set of 5 skills. This diagram, I'm turning on my pointer here. So I'm using this. This is kind of a summary page in the assessment that we use, and it shows those 5 things on 2 axes. And so one axis here is the awareness and regulation, and then you see up here self and others. It's self and others, and awareness and regulation. So 3 of those 5 skills are related to ourselves, our emotional selves. And those 3 on this diagram are colored in orange. And I'll talk through those in a second. And then the ones that are related to others are colored purple. So let's go through the self-related skills here. So the first one is self-awareness. So again, on a scale of 0 to 100, this is showing you what this person scored. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but how self-aware am I? When I'm feeling something in the moment, Do I know what I'm feeling? Do I know that I'm feeling something? Do I know what I'm feeling? So just a measure of awareness. The next one is self-regulation, and it's a little bit more behavioral. Can I alter or control or harness my behavior in light of those emotions? So the first one's, am I aware of them? The second one is, can I regulate my behavior? So we talk a lot about to get what I want. So in every moment, right, if I'm interacting with one of my children, if I'm interacting with one of my coworkers, or one of the people that my ministry serves, I go into that interaction and I have a goal. I want something from that interaction. And self-regulation is all about, can I harness my emotions and my behavior to achieve what I want from this interaction? And then the third one that's related to self is motivation. And you can see it wraps around the whole circle here, because it has an impact and an influence on all five of them. But that's really related to, can I motivate myself intrinsically? And that's a skill that we can grow and develop. How good am I at motivating myself to then do that, to change my behavior, to pay attention to what I'm feeling, to pay attention to what other people are feeling? So that's the motivation skill. As we move into others, the fourth skill, the first of others, is called social awareness. Another word for this is empathy. This is all about, how good am I? What's my skill level at doing what we've all heard we need to be really good at, which is putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, imagining what their perspective is. And this is all focused around emotion. So what is somebody else feeling? How good am I at knowing that and understanding that and being aware of that? And then the fifth one is social regulation. And another word for that might be influence. How good am I at influencing another person's emotions? So can I calm them down if I need to? And can I increase their emotional level if I need to, depending on what's going on in the situation? So that's the 5 skills that make up emotional intelligence. I also said that we kind of use emotional intelligence and EQ, emotional quotient, back and forth. EQ is when we're looking at a number or a score, and then we pull everything together. The definition that we use is, it's the ability to sense, understand, and effectively apply emotions to be more collaborative and productive with others. So you can kind of see it builds in there both others and ourselves, and then our ability to sense and understand and be effective in our behavior. So I'm going to pause there just for a sec and just kind of check for understanding and questions and comments. Anybody have anything that they want to add to that or clarify? Is that what you've been taught before? Anybody, feel free to jump in.
Lauren, it's Jonathan. I really like the word collaborative in that definition. I guess I haven't really thought about it much in those terms. Think about it a lot, right? Relating to others and which is all a part of it. But I think that word brings new perspective a little bit to it. At least it does for me, right? How do we not just how do we relate, but how do we exist together? How do we work together? How do we live life together, so to speak? And how do we get things done together? So just a quick observation there from me. I like that a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, when you think about collaboration, collaboration, we often talk about kind of the group, right? The output of the group is greater than the sum of the parts. And we want that synergy, and a lot of that comes from understanding uniquenesses in the group, right? You really want to be able to leverage the different, diverse strengths that are in the group. Anybody else? Any questions or comments on that?
Lauren, the thing that stands out to me, this is Heather, and is as you were talking through it, I got a bit nervous because I think these are skills that can be used for good and for selfish, manipulative reasons, both. And I think I've had some experiences with people that are quite skilled in some of these areas that have been quite manipulative. So I really appreciate the examples you gave, because I think they leaned more toward the area of cooperative and collaborative, as well as really being able to support and to help other people. So I just was owning kind of my internal responses, was getting a bit nervous, not for what you said, but just how you can use this information and these skills in a very self-serving way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I had not thought about that, Heather. And that's a great example also of being self-awareness, of being self-aware, right? So in a conversation, you're noticing your nerves, and then and thank you for being vulnerable and willing to share that. So that's kind of another step, but also, but just that's an example of you kind of noticing what's going on and then paying attention to that as nervousness.
Maybe Heather's observation is why it's so critical to partner this with the gospel so that it doesn't go off the rails.
That was my confidence as well.
That's good. Well, and yeah, please feel free to continue elaborating on that. But I'm real curious if anybody wants to share. Just when you think about your roles right now as leaders, what is the most difficult aspect of that job right now? Does anybody have any examples they want to share, or curious?
Just an observation from me. I don't, not specific to a team member or a team, but I think one of the challenges I find in life these days, I guess I would say, is right. Everybody comes from their own perspective, and they believe it's the right one, right? So, which I get, right? I've got my own perspectives, as well. So I think understanding that, but trying to connect with that in a meaningful way, and respect and understand somebody else's perspective, even if it's maybe one that I don't have or one that I even disagree with, and just relating to that. And I guess continuing to go back to the word I mentioned in your definition, figuring out how to still collaborate, right, and work together and exist together and get meaningful things done. But I do see that as something that can be challenging.
This is John. To me, the most difficult part right now is, and I've been working virtually for 3 years now, but it's trying to collaboratively, influence the emotions of others when it's in a totally virtual environment and there's a lot of emails back and forth, that kind of thing, when it's rather than face to face, or I see how someone enters into the office that day and I can kind of sense their mood or whatever it might be. That it's just, I think, very difficult to do that from long distance.
That's really good, John. I'm curious, would you be willing to share some of the things that you've tried?
Well, yeah, some of them have included, let's not do this over email. Let's have a call right now, so that you can get that sense. And even better, if I can see you, on a Zoom call or whatever, then just trying to talk it out that way. I do think that I have a high level of not only self-awareness, but the awareness of how others are at the time. And that's what's so difficult when you can't or aren't seeing them at the time. So it's been, let's get on a call instead of doing this. And then even in that format, it's tell me what's really going on, what's behind that, just trying to dig down to find out what the real issue or struggle is.
Yeah, that's good. John, what I heard you say a couple things is really, first, being aware that there might be something that would be better for a different mode of communication. So choosing the right medium is huge when we're all in these virtual and remote work environments. So that's great. And then it sounds like asking good questions. And as a coach, I know you're very skilled at that. So, but asking good questions and just kind of helping people to then improve their own awareness of how they're feeling and share that with you to make the meeting more effective. Those are good. Good. I really appreciate you sharing those.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to share something before we move on? So, so we're in a group that I think everybody here understands the gospel. So I kind of wrote this. I was like, how many quick summaries of the gospel are there out there? But this is me taking largely 2 Corinthians 5:21 and then adding a little bit and elaborating. So the gospel is the fact that God has restored everything in creation through his son, Jesus Christ, who had no sin, yet took our sin on himself so that we could become the righteousness of God and enjoy him forever. So hopefully I try to do something that would be, non-denominational and sort of permeate various traditions. So, send me a chat or let me know if I offended anybody, but that's the definition of the gospel that I'm working with. And when we think about what does that have to do with our leadership, I go to that as the motive, and looking just a couple of verses where we see first Jesus talking to the apostles saying, that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. But it's not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So I'm so glad, Heather, that you brought up what you brought up, because if we look at the why do we want to grow our emotional intelligence? Why do we want to be able to influence others and regulate our behavior? Hopefully it's for this reason, not to lord it over like the world does, but to serve the way that we were served through the life and death that Jesus lived and died for us. And then, again, you've got Peter kind of reiterating this. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you're willing. And God wants you to be not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but be examples to the flock. And I think this is probably particularly for pastors, but I think as leaders, there's some good stuff that we can get out of this. And I think it's interesting seeing that terminology lorded over in both of these scenarios. And as I reflect on that story I shared at the beginning with this new boss, I think that's part of what I felt, right? I felt like, oh, this person's not necessarily here for me. I'm here for him. And so as we are wrestling with and reflecting on how we lead others, how do we follow this example that we see in Christ? So does anybody have any examples about how that works its way into your work now? How you, because that's pretty high level. But I guess first of all, if you have anything you want to add to the gospel, feel free to share that. But how does this impact your work? How does this influence your leadership to remember how Christ led you?
Ask that question again.
Yeah, let me see if how does Jesus call us to lead others in light of what he has done for us? So how do you see this in your leadership? How does the gospel influence the way you lead others?
Lauren, for me, I was thinking about just the process that we're going through at different phases, different organizations, and looking into 2021, the goals that you're trying to set, how do we budget, given just changes even in economic revenue streams, and some of the tension that comes with all of that. And then add in all John was sharing about, when you're working remotely, you can't tell what's going on in people's lives, you can't read people as well. For me, to be a leader in this time means that I am considering others and their situation and not just what I want to get out of a conversation. But there is a bigger, more significant goal in mind of the kingdom, and saying, how do I surrender what I want? Not surrender it completely, meaning putting it not first and foremost in everything I'm doing to get what I want, but to say, God, what are you after here? And then how do I honor people in this process of communicating what I have to bring, what I'm looking for, and finding out what other people are looking for? So it does move me from motivated to influence people and to get something out of a discussion or a conversation, which is really good prep as I'm talking about this for a meeting later today. But is really important to say, okay, let's really truly understand what's on other people's minds, their agenda, and then ultimately, God, what do you want out of this time? I want this, they want this. Where can we come together in light of something that's bigger than just our immediate responsibilities that we have? So
Yeah. That's good, Heather. Thank you.
I think part of it for me too is, especially what I'm doing today, is my testimony, the things that have occurred, is just presenting God to the people that are interested in, based on what he's done in that particular situation for me, if that makes sense to anybody.
So are you saying, Eloise, like actually sharing the gospel and how it's impacted you and your story with the people that you're serving?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's great.
I think for me, we work with addicts. And so that can be a challenge at times where I can fall into self-righteous kind of thinking. And so remembering that the love of the Lord is patient with me. God is long-suffering. Christ wasn't, sitting on the cross going, oh, that Liz, she's going to mess us up again. But just the love of the Lord toward me, the patience, the steadfastness, the long-suffering of the Lord, that model for me and how Christ has been toward me helps me to model that for the people that we're walking with for long periods of time.
Yeah. What I hear you guys saying is it's a motive, and it's also the target that you're aiming at. So it's the motivation that you use to kind of lead differently, maybe than your instinct. Anybody else? Thanks everybody so much for sharing. When I think about, I think that language lorded over, when I think about that, I tend to think about things like, okay, I just got promoted into this leadership role. Now I'm in authority, and things that I'm excited about from taking that authority and new responsibility and being responsible for the performance and success of other people. When I really admit what I feel excited about, it's that now I get to park closer to the building. I get a reserved parking space. I get a corner office. I get, more time off or increased flexibility. There's benefits to the increased authority, and I'm going to hoard those. So I get excited about doing that. Now, when we're sort of scheduling vacation around the holidays, I'm the boss, and so I get to come in and say, hey, here's when I'm taking time off. You guys work around that. We have to stay late or work the weekend. That's for you guys to do because I'm now, I have higher levels of status. Those are just some of the examples that come to mind when I think of lording it over. And then when I hear Jesus say that I came to serve, not to be served, part of what happens in my head is I kind of flip those things, the 180 or the inverse. And I go, oh man, so if I'm the boss, then now I'm motivated to not just say, just do your job, but to really understand, like Heather was saying, understand your particular gifts and your particular situation. And I can even voluntarily surrender the things that I wanted to spend my time on. Like I'm the leader. I wanted to invest my gifts in doing these particular tasks, but you're actually better at those, or you want to grow in those. And so I'm going to surrender my desire and let you focus on those tasks. So as the leader, I get to go first at surrender, like I saw my Lord do for me, and not lord it over people. So I don't know if that's kind of the way that I think about it. So I want to kind of get specific now, get out of the clouds a little bit and talk practical. one of the reasons that we use all these assessment tools is to help leaders really uncover things. Because I think the first thing is listening, right? Like first you can ask people, well, what's going on in your world? What are you feeling? What are you needing? What are you good at? But sometimes we don't even know that about ourselves. And so then leaders can actually use some of these tools to go deeper into their people. So I feel like the alignment of the gospel and emotional intelligence puts at least these 3 goals onto any leader's list of goals. So understand ourselves. So first, in order to really do what Heather was saying and surrender, I kind of need to know what's important to me. I need to know how I am and who I am and what gets me excited and why I'm doing this role and why I'm leading this team. So that self-understanding work guided by the Holy Spirit is extremely important. I also really want to understand my team members and them in particular. So not just sort of in general, like this is what all team members need, or this is what all people appreciate from their leaders or their bosses, but really understand the individual elements of each person, what their preferences are, what they appreciate, how they feel appreciated, what kinds of tasks they're good at before they get delegated to them, those sorts of things. And then I can, number 3, sort of choose to adapt myself. So because I'm the leader, I can be the first one to surrender and change and be willing to adapt, because that's the extra responsibility and authority that I've been given as the leader. So again, not sort of saying, okay, now I'm in charge, you all adapt to me, but instead do the opposite and say, I'm gonna almost race you to the opportunity to adapt myself and surrender. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. So how do we do that? How do we really understand the people that we lead? And I mentioned this a second ago, but just really listen. And I want to kind of emphasize this word, because there's times when you can be empathetic with somebody and have that social awareness when you don't have the ability to actually get their story from them. But anytime you can listen and ask questions like John was talking about, and draw things out of people and really hear their story, it's going to make it easier. So when you're spending time with your people, being able to really just take the time, give them the time, and ask good questions to draw their stories out and really listen. And of course, we're all pretty familiar with James 1:19, but my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So I think listening is a big part of it. And some practical ways to do that with the people on your team. Again, looking at it as serving them first is, I think you're going to need to put 3 things into it: time, energy, and possibly, financial resources as well. But these are just some ideas on how to do this. Is invest the time. So put your people on your calendar first. We talk to our clients about this a lot. Let's say you've got 10 people on your team. I hear a lot of leaders say that they just don't have any time. And when I talk to them about listening to their team and understanding their team, they say, oh my gosh, where am I going to get the time to do that? But I think that's one of the main ways that you can surrender to your people, is put that time on the calendar first. And I usually recommend, 30 minutes one-on-one with each person who reports to you every week. And so, again, you got 10 people on the team, half an hour each person. That's 5 hours of your week. And 10 is a lot of direct reports. So I don't have that many clients who have 10 direct reports. So I'm just trying to use that example to say, even if you've got 10 people, one-on-one with each of them, it still leaves you, in the theory of the imaginary 40-hour work week, 35 hours left to do other things that you need to do. I'd say invest energy. I loved, again, what John said about asking questions to draw people out. So I'd say invest your energy, be fully present with them when they need you, and available to them. Prepare ahead of time and ask good questions. So different people on the team are going to share differently. Some people are going to be more ready and willing. Some people are going to be a little bit quieter and more reserved. And so it's going to take you having the skill set to draw them out so that you can understand who they are and how they are. Another thing, reflect on and imagine their perspective, especially when it's different from yours. So a real true measure of empathy is being able to not only get along with the people who agree with you, but to imagine the person, and maybe you've got someone on your team and you know you disagree, and maybe you've said, hey, for the sake of this mission and our team, like this is the standard, this is the value, we all are going to align around this. I'm making the decision. I need everybody to be on board with this. But now you know that they disagree with you. And so when you're not with them, you can even sort of imagine, think about, spend time processing. What is their perspective? What is it about their story that brought them to this perspective? And unfortunately, I feel like that's pretty unusual in this time. We've got so much division, but growing your skill as a leader of being able to understand perspectives that are different from you. I was going through an exercise recently, and the exercise to grow empathy was to imagine, and this is kind of from a marketing or business development standpoint, sort of imagine the person who wouldn't hire you. Imagine the person who wouldn't want to become your client. And I was, trying to come up with, I was trying to imagine, who would that be? And I was thinking about a leader who, kind of likes to lord it over their employees, right? They're like, I don't necessarily want to lead the way that Jesus did or serve my employees. I just want them to get their jobs done. And I was working on this exercise to just sort of process like how that person thinks. So this is clearly someone that I disagree with philosophically, but I can go deeper. Why did they think that? And then start to value their perspective by doing that work even when you're not with somebody. And then another way to serve your people is to develop these things. So we're talking about how emotional intelligence is 5 skills. So by even investing your time and energy into developing your own emotional intelligence, that's a way to serve and surrender to your team. And then finally, just investing other resources. So there's other things you can do to invest in them. You can use tools to make it easier to understand people, like some of the assessments that we're talking about, and then find development opportunities and be willing to spend money on the growth of the people that you lead and serve. So, you ask somebody, what do they want to do in 5 years? And they say, well, I really want to be, able to be a manager, or I really want to go into a completely different industry. And then you invest your resources in supporting them with their goals, because now you've listened and you understand what their goals are. So I mentioned before, the 4th of the 5 skills of emotional quotient is empathy or social awareness. It's defined as the ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people and how your words and actions affect others. So I'll pause there for a second. I think Stephen maybe wrote down the last definition, no pressure to write down this one, but I don't want to move too quickly off it. But the ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people and how your words and actions affect others. And I emphasize this 4th skill, empathy, because again, I just see in a lot of the leaders that we talk to, and then looking at these demands that we read in the gospel of how Jesus loved us. And I just feel like if leaders could get better at this, if they could see this as their role and then do it. And that's part of why I get excited about this secular teaching. Emotional intelligence, came out of, didn't necessarily come out of the Word of God, but I think they're so aligned because we can actually measure it. We can measure it, we can do something about it. Without understanding your people and what they each uniquely bring to the team and need from you, you can't truly serve them. So again, I almost want to, at the risk of, sort of being heretical, like it's like different than the golden rule, right? It's actually not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's, in this case, it's do unto others as they need you to do unto them. So the way that you serve isn't necessarily what you need or needed from your supervisor, but it's what do they need. And the only way you're going to learn that is to understand them in particular. So back to you guys again. How do we practically do this? How do we practically put the people on our teams above us and serve them? Did any ideas come in your minds as I was talking, or any questions about anything?
Lauren, I have a question. I love the whole concept, right, of and we all have herd and try to practice right servant leadership kind of thing. But I love the reminder today of what it means to just constantly be in the mindset of serving the people that we work with and who maybe even report to us. So love that. A logistical question. So you said one goal should be 30 minutes with each person that reports to you, and you said per week. Is that correct?
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's where I'd like to start.
yeah, and you're right. So some people right away would say, I don't have time for that. But one of the things you're saying is that's one of the main roles you should play, right, as a leader in seeking to understand your people, is investing that time. So I love that. So my logistical question is, what should that time look like, right? 30 minutes a week is a decent amount of time, right? So week to week, do you have any direction on, what that time should involve?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of direction. I don't want to, totally change the agenda of today, but it's actually fairly simple. And again, another way that I really like to, kind of lay down our needs and surrender those for the people is to let them drive the agenda of the first half of that meeting. And so sometimes people think about that as kind of 15-15. So the first 15 minutes are for the employee, and then the second 15 minutes are for the manager. Or other people break it into thirds even. The first 10 minutes are for the employee to come to me with anything that they need as their supervisor. And it takes some energy, some effort actually as the leader to kind of not launch into my list, right? I'm going to prepare well. I've got my notes from my meeting last week, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, okay, here's my agenda, but I want to talk about what you want to talk about first. And then the second 10 minutes being the manager's agenda, and then the third 10 minutes focusing on the future and leadership and development opportunities for that employee. So a couple different models there. They really, the people I really like on this topic are have a podcast called Manager Tools, and a book called The Effective Manager, which I just think is fantastic around the logistics. Jonathan, you're asking about how to do this stuff.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. Yeah, I appreciate that. So it's not every week, tell me more about your story. It's just that constant connection. But you breaking it up like that was, that really helps me. I appreciate that.
And it ends up becoming that space where people can come to you and they say, I have needs, or my kid's sick, or, my parents got COVID and I'm going to need to be out of the office for a while, or, I've been working on this task really hard and I need you to explain it better because I feel like it's still unclear. I know we've talked about this, so many times, but can you still just kind of clarify it for me? Or I'm working on this goal that we both set collectively and I'm bumping up against this obstacle and I need you to remove it because you're my supervisor. Who else? Practical ways that you do this or you've seen this done?
I want to say I love this part because even though I have a small team and I do that, but for me, myself, to have that connection with my boss, I don't have that one-on-one. So I understand and know the importance of that. And this piece, the one-on-one, is huge. It is really, really huge. I don't have it, but I'm able to give it to others. So that's my feedback.
Good. I'm glad that you're doing that. And you're actually using your needs of what you're not getting as an example of to motivate that with your team.
Yeah.
Seems like for this to be highly effective, you also have to cultivate what I guess I would call a culture of openness, that you're not always just going to correct them, or you're going to be like, well, thanks for that good idea, but we're going to do this instead. Or, so that when you're, like if you do the, say, first 15 for them, second 15 for you, that you're really listening to and valuing and are open to the input that they are bringing in their first 15 minutes, if you use that framework.
Yep.
So much of it has to be also just about, I think, the ethos of what you're creating, that openness in terms of the space, and the, that you really do want to know what they think, which would imply that that you do believe they bring value to who you are, to the organization, to your team. And that sort of would have to be, I think, hypercritical in this process. I think
that's
Eloise's example is a great one. She can cultivate it for the people under her, but she doesn't feel it up the line, it sounds like. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth there, Eloise, but that's just kind of what it sounded like a little bit as an illustration.
No, that's really insightful, Stephen. I mean, so yeah, if you're in an environment where maybe this isn't necessarily led from the very tippy top of the organization, you can look at this. I want to grow my emotional intelligence, motivated by the gospel, to create this for my part of the organization. So that's part of how I'm surrendering, is I'm sort of standing in the gap there between the overall culture of the organization and then using that influence to create a safer, healthier culture on my team, so that they can then develop and follow the fullness, be kind of sort of flourish the way that God's created them to flourish and is calling them to flourish. So you get to be the one that surrenders and does that. Really good stuff. Anybody else? Practical ways? All right. So what stops us? I want to move through the next few slides a little bit more quickly, but I just want to talk a little bit about this. This stuff gets me really interested, and that's why there's a lot of depth to emotional intelligence, because when you really start looking at the brain stuff, the neuroscience that's going on behind it, it's pretty fascinating. And I think especially this is another reason why I think it really is exciting to talk about this in a Christian context or a gospel-centered context, because you really start to see, okay, so if before I was in the womb, God formed me, if he's created me, if that's who my God is, and then you look at the way this is actually happening in our brains and our bodies, and the latest science that's coming out about that stuff, it's pretty fascinating. So obviously we don't have time to go super deep into this, but just wanted to talk a little bit about how this works. Everyone's heard of fight or flight. Our bodies are designed to, and this is just a picture of a very rudimentary picture of our brains here, but you can kind of see that higher cortex, that's what makes us human, right? So we have the ability to have these emotions and think and do different things. But what happens is when our bodies are under high emotion, it gets hijacked and disabled. And so so Stephen, you were talking about, like, one of the ways that maybe it's hard for this to happen with a team and a leader is you kind of realize the leader doesn't even necessarily want this. So in a lot of ways, I think that's one of the first takeaways is, do I want for my team what we're talking about? So, because if you don't, right, like being that self-aware, that might be the first place to start is, you know what, I kind of get logically on paper what we're talking about, but I don't even, honestly, if I'm honest with myself, really want that. I just want to go to work and, have everybody do what they're supposed to. And not necessarily, I'm noticing I don't really want that. So that's the first place. But what if you do want it, but then you're still noticing that, man, you have a really hard day and you go home and, people always talk about, and then you kick the dog, right? That stress is there. So part of what's happening is that when our bodies get under high emotion, joy, surprise, sadness, fear, contempt, anger, and disgust are sort of the 7 core emotions that we often talk about. That bigger part of our brain gets disabled, and then what we're doing is we're reacting the way that our body is designed to react when we're under a threat. And so, human beings have been around for a long time. I always imagine like the caveman, right? And I'm, being chased by a bear or something. And so there is a real present threat right there. And so my body is designed to do this. It shuts down all of the non-essential functions of my body that I don't need if I'm going to try to run away from the bear, or maybe choose a smaller but still threatening animal that if I'm going to fight, and then that's fight or flight. And then the one that we don't often talk about is freeze. And so, of course, our body also has the ability to play dead. Well, one of the interesting things that happens with stress is our body goes into this reaction mode. We're not necessarily thinking the way that we normally do. And what happens is if you run away from the bear, all this adrenaline and cortisol comes into your body and you experience all this stress. And then as you're running, the physical activity pushes all of that out of your body again. And so you can calm down when you get away from the bear. If you stand and you fight the bear, the same thing happens. All the adrenaline and cortisol rushes into your body, your higher cortex gets disabled, but then you fight the bear and you win. And through that physical activity, your body can then calm down again. When you freeze, you play dead, there isn't that physical exertion that necessarily happens. So that natural cycle where that adrenaline and cortisol gets to come out through the physical exertion doesn't happen. And so if you kind of look at the animal kingdom, and this is not my expertise, but I've heard this is true, then what happens is if an animal plays dead and then the threat leaves, they will actually like shake or howl or yell or things like that. And our bodies work similarly, where you need to have the physical exertion to get rid of that stress. And so that's one of the reasons, and I'll share this in a slide in a second, that one of the things that we can do to take care of ourselves and make it easier for us to be more self-aware and notice the emotions that we're feeling when things get hijacked with our teams or with the people that we're serving in our ministries is exercising every day. That's one of the reasons that works and helps to keep us calm and de-stressed, because it completes that stress cycle. Anyway, so that's part of why it gets hard, is when that is happening in our bodies. And so the skill that then we're choosing to develop as leaders is that self-awareness, is paying attention. So like Heather said earlier, I'm feeling nervous as you're talking about this. So she's noticing something going on in her body. The hairs on the back of her head are standing up. There's all these things that our bodies do, right? We start to get sweaty. We notice that we're stressed. And so part of the reason that that's the reason that our bodies do this. But in an office environment, in many ministry contexts, and not all of them, but our threats usually are going to result in that freeze response, right? We're not actually being chased by a bear. And so, but our bodies may be responding like that. So when we're in a meeting and our boss gives us a dirty look, or they say something that triggers us, or a coworker does, or even on the way into the office, we get cut off in traffic, or before we leave the house, we have a hard time getting one of our children's clothes on and out to the bus or to the school on time. Those things are experienced by our bodies as stress. And without that intentional calming, that's part of what makes it really hard to respond effectively later on in the day. So what I want to do is just kind of spend the last couple minutes going through these. I'm not going to be able to give them that much attention, but like Jonathan said, we'll send you this presentation, and we can always keep talking about it. But basically, there's just a couple tips on these slides for each of the 5 skills that you can do to develop these things. So from a self-awareness, one of the things that you can do is you can journal. So I was taught early in my faith to journal as kind of a way to pray. And I found over time that including my emotions in that journaling process has been really helpful for me to understand what I'm feeling and become more self-aware. And I honestly, I don't think I'm the most self-aware emotionally person, but it really helps me to write and reflect on my day and talk about the emotional highs and lows. And I even need a cheat sheet, right? So I shared these 7 emotions a second ago, but fear, joy, surprise, anger, disgust, sadness, and contempt. Sometimes I need to look at the list. So I'll start my journal, Lord, I am feeling, and it'll take me a minute. Which one of these, I'll look at the list. Which one of these things am I feeling? And then another one is to just know what your triggers are. So as you're journaling and you reflect on different situations that maybe you responded differently or you felt similar things, you can start to notice patterns of what triggers you. And being aware of those is a great gift that you can give to the people that you lead, because then you can learn to avoid or prevent them. I was talking to a client yesterday who said that he noticed himself getting really frustrated with somebody, and then with the way that he regulated, as we were talking about his emotional intelligence, he sent another person on the team into the conversation because he was afraid that he was going to kind of lash out. So there's some ideas there on self-awareness. I talked about getting physical exercise for self-regulation. Giving your body a chance to complete that stress cycle every day can be extremely helpful to calm yourself down. And then, of course, practicing prayer, meditating, mindfulness practice, and breathing can all be really good. So, John, when you were talking about noticing people are stressed in some of your coaching calls, part of me was wondering, and this can, different contexts, this can feel a little bit weird, and you got to kind of get used to it. But definitely, I've been in situations where I'm meeting with somebody I know they're very heightened, and so we'll just take some time and intentionally, do long exhales. I mean, there's a ton of literature out there about breathing and mindfulness and things that we can't talk through today. Motivation. How do you grow your motivation skill? Big one is just writing down your goals. So a lot of this stuff's just very simple, but a lot of us still don't do them. But writing down your goals and envisioning what you want the future to look like for the team, for your future, are two things that can really help us be more motivated to do some of these things, like you were talking about, Stephen, that maybe we don't even necessarily want to do. How do we grow our social awareness? Try to spend time predicting how is somebody going to respond to this situation, this encounter that I know we need to have. And then observe body language. So again, John, great examples that you used when you said, if I can see somebody, you've been doing virtual for a long time, but if I can see somebody on the screen, I might be able to be a little bit better at empathy, because then I can ask them questions to know what's going on and make sure that this is the right time and context to have this conversation. And then social regulation. How do you influence others? Be curious. We talked about that too. Really get good at asking good questions. Similar to having the 7 core emotions, giving yourself a cheat sheet of good questions to ask when you get stuck with an employee. If you notice that certain people on your team, you get stuck, they share less with you. Writing down some good questions ahead of time to draw them out can be good. And then maintaining eye contact. I know this, sounds simple and possibly basic, but it's just the way humans work. Bonding and rapport happens with people through physical eye contact and body language. So those are just some things that we can all be working on to develop our skills around emotional intelligence. So I did that pretty quick. We only have a couple minutes before I need to give this back to Jonathan. So I want to just see if anybody has any last questions or comments. And then at the end of this, Jonathan's going to send out an email with the PDF of this presentation. And then I've got a couple links that are going to come your way. If anybody wants to, I just wanted to offer a free EQ assessment. You can answer some questions about yourself and get that measure, that diagram of your emotional intelligence. And then just another PDF ebook about ways to grow your EQ. So before we hand it back to Jonathan, any questions or comments?
Yeah, we've got a few minutes here. Let's open it up for some additional questions here.
Lauren, as you've worked with different leaders who maybe at some point saw that they were struggling, maybe their EQ is pretty low, what's the response to this? I mean, what can we expect as people are starting to work on this ourselves, or we're helping others think more about their EQ? How quickly or slowly does that change you begin to see results?
I mean, everybody's so different, Heather. I think coaching is huge as a way to create the context. So what I love to see is the manager on the team growing in their emotional intelligence and also growing in their coaching skills to be able to do this with their teams. Sometimes somebody outside, like Stephen can be brought in to help with that. But I mean, it's just so different. I mean, there, people that are highly motivated and kind of run towards, problems and challenges. We talk about the high D, they may be pretty quick. They may be like, well, what, I really got to overcome this challenge and grow my emotional intelligence, and they'll put a lot of work into it. Other people are just steadier paced, and so it takes longer. So I don't have a great simple answer to that.
Lauren, how much do you feel like, I've always felt like on the self side of this process, that one of the biggest factors involved is what I call permissioning. So permissioning myself to actually feel what it is that I'm feeling, to be aware of it, permissioning myself that when I need to regulate, that's an okay thing for me to do. So I'm just really curious how you perceive that idea of permissioning involved with the self side of this whole growth chart.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, yeah, I resonate a lot with that. I feel like very early, and it just depends on the context. It depends on the person and kind of what they've been living under. But I think that permission to feel is huge. I mean, we are, I hope, sort of leaving an era where emotions were meant to be downplayed or ignored in the workplace, for sure. And I think we're starting to see more of the benefits of understanding what you're feeling and then being able to harness those emotions. And that's what we've been talking about today. But yeah, a lot of people are kind of like, well, that was not a part of my growing up. Was, you certainly didn't, and then I could go all kinds of different directions, but I mean, you can get into different gender types of things too. So as a young boy, I was never allowed to feel, sad or afraid, but it was okay if I felt angry. And so maybe when I do feel, I mistake every emotion for anger. I mean, there's all kinds of, stuff we could talk about. But I think that's huge. I mean, early in my faith, I remember somebody sharing about a book called Faith is Not a Feeling. And I mean, I remember like fairly proactively trying to teach myself as a new Christian to depend on what I know is true about God and not what I'm feeling. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to do it, right? I feel like in some ways knowing what you're feeling and then depending and trusting the Lord. Better, like the way that I interpreted that, which was kind of ignore what I'm feeling and don't worry about it.
Any other last minute questions for Lauren?
Can I ask, this is kind of off the grid, but it's family related with my children. This whole process can be used in that perspective as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, emotional intelligence is about, humans. I like to apply it to leadership. I feel like the workplace context is a pretty important one for us as Christians to be able to go into and lead the way that Jesus is calling us to lead. But obviously, yeah, family is not my primary context, but there's a ton of this stuff out there for that Eloise. So social and emotional learning, it's often called, and has begun to be incorporated even into public elementary schools. So if you start looking around, you'll see this a lot. There's a great book called, I think it's No Drama Discipline, that I've read a little bit about, that's very brain and emotional intelligence oriented with our kids and helping them do what Stephen was talking about, understand what they're feeling, give themselves permission to feel, and then redirecting and disciplining based on that. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I would refer you to other experts on that.
Okay. And that offer you mentioned earlier, I put it in the chat that I'm interested in taking advantage of that.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get an email out with.
Okay.
Yeah, great, Lauren. Thank you so much. And everybody, of course, you can go so much deeper with all of this material. I loved today because it was just a great overview and started to get into things a little bit more deeply. But if you want to spend more time with Lauren and with Kutsko, like we said, we'll be sending out an email with some follow-up information and, of course, Lauren's email address there. And so, Lauren, I assume, right, they can just reach out directly to you, talk a little bit more, set up a time to chat. Does that work okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Love hearing about you guys and your teams and being helpful in any way I can.
Great. And then also, if you guys go to the Venture 19 website, venture19.org/partnerships, you can read a little bit more about Kutsko in there and some things that they're offering for Venture 19 organizations. So take advantage of that. But Kutsko is such an incredible resource here in our very own Phoenix community. So connect with them and dig a little bit deeper. So, hey, Lauren, could I ask you to pray for this group, and then I'll close it down.
Sure. Lord, we thank you so much for being here with us, for creating us the way that you've created us, the way that you have made our bodies work and our brains work. Lord, we thank you for the leadership authority that you've given us, and calling us to delegate and have dominion and help people live into the fullness of who you've created them to be as well. Lord, we thank you for all these things. We know that it's a high calling and it's very difficult, and we thank you that you are walking with us through your Spirit, and giving us the wisdom and everything else that we need to be successful. Amen.
Amen. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, Lauren.
Lauren, thank you again, and I'll look for that follow-up information.